After my husband cheated on me with the wife of Canada's most powerful pharmaceutical executive, that executive walked into my life, slid a marriage proposal across a restaurant table, and asked me to answer before the appetizers arrived. I looked at Grant through the window, laughing at something Camille was saying. And I told Sebastian yes before he finished the sentence. I need to back up. I am a corporate attorney. Have been for 11 years, 10 of them at the same Bay Street firm, most of them spent negotiating pharmaceutical licensing agreements, patent transfers, and the kind of contracts that keep multi-billion-dollar drug portfolio legally airtight. My job is to read the fine print before everyone else, to find the clause buried in page 47 that will matter in 3 years. I am, professionally and by disposition, not someone who gets caught off guard. And yet, Grant and I had been married for 9 years when he sat across from me at our kitchen table in Rosedale and told me Vertex Bio was under CRA scrutiny for its SR&ED tax credit claims. His biotech startup, the one I had spent evenings and weekends helping him build, the one we had partly funded by refinancing our home, was, he said, facing an audit that could result in assessments against our personal assets if the agency decided the research credit filings looked aggressive. He'd spoken to an accountant. The recommendation was a formal separation of personal and corporate assets, temporary, a protective measure, just until the audit concluded. He slid the document across the counter. I read every page. That's what I do. I read it, identified it as a standard separation agreement, noted it had not been filed with the court, and signed it. I trusted the man I'd shared a bed with for 9 years more than I trusted my own professional instincts. That was the most expensive mistake of my career. He filed it the following morning. The court stamped it 6 weeks before he told me it was still just sitting with his accountant. I found out the same way you find out about most things in Toronto, by being in the wrong restaurant at the right time. I had a client dinner in Yorkville, a licensing negotiation that wrapped early. Walking past the window of a wine bar I'd been to once with Grant, years ago, I saw him sitting at a corner table near the fireplace. He was leaning forward in the way he used to lean toward me when he wanted me to think he was listening. The woman across from him was wearing a cream silk blouse I recognized from a magazine feature I'd read 3 months earlier in a profile of Camille Ashford, wife of Sebastian Ashford, founder and CEO of Ashford Pharmaceuticals, the company whose licensing contracts I had spent the better part of 2 years negotiating on behalf of their U.S. partner. Grant was wearing the watch I gave him for our 8th anniversary. I stood on the sidewalk in the November cold for approximately 4 minutes. I did not cry. I have never been good at crying on schedule. A voice behind me said, "You've seen enough." I turned around. Sebastian Ashford was standing on the pavement in a gray overcoat, his hands in his pockets, watching the same window I was watching. He was taller than I expected from photographs. He had the face of someone who made decisions and lived with them. "Walk with me," he said. We went to the lobby bar of a hotel down the street. He ordered water, I ordered scotch. He placed a manila folder on the table between us and told me to open it. The first document was the filed separation agreement, my signature, the court stamp, the date. He'd obtained it through his lawyers. The second document was a 40-page forensic summary prepared by an independent accounting firm. It detailed 18 months of wire transfers from an Ashford Pharmaceutical subsidiary account to a company called Apogee Consulting Group, incorporated in Nova Scotia, CCO listed as Luca Ferrante, Camille's younger brother. The transfers totaled just over $2.1 million, invoiced as strategic research consulting and clinical trial coordination, no deliverables on file, no signed completion certificates, no evidence any work had been performed. Every dollar that went to Apogee was split, Sebastian said. His voice was flat, like he was reading a quarterly report. 60% moved offshore within 48 hours. The rest was wired directly to Vertex Bio's operating account at TD. I set my glass down. Grant has been running Vertex Bio on Ashford's money, I said, not a question. For 14 months. He keeps a cut as a laundering fee and uses the rest to cover his operating costs. Camille gets her money offshore where I can't touch it in the divorce proceedings. Your ex-husband provides the mechanism. Everyone benefits. Except my company, and as of 6 weeks ago, you. I looked at the folder, then at him. Why are you telling me this? Because you're a lawyer. One of the best pharmaceutical contract attorneys in the country, from what I'm told. I need someone inside Ashford with standing to access the financial records, legal authority to conduct an internal review, and the additional reason in the world to be thorough. He held my gaze. I need a general counsel I can trust completely. And for what I'm asking, the simplest legal mechanism for that level of trust is a spouse. He slid a second document across the table. An appointment booking at Old City Hall, the following morning, 8:30 a.m. I looked through the lobby window at the street, at the dark and the headlights and the city, moving at its ordinary pace, indifferent to the fact that everything I thought I knew about my life had just been rearranged. I have conditions, I said. Full access to every financial record at Ashford, including the subsidiary accounts. No interference with my methodology or my conclusions, and you tell me everything you know. Right now, before I agree to anything. Sebastian settled back in his chair. Something in his expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Approval, I thought, the reserved kind. I expected nothing less, he said. We married the next morning in 11 minutes at Old City Hall. I wore a dove gray blazer I'd owned for 5 years. Sebastian wore a navy suit, no tie. The registrar mispronounced my name once, and I didn't correct him. When the certificate was issued, Sebastian handed me my copy without ceremony. I photographed it resting on the hood of his car on Queen Street and sent it to Grant with a single message. Thank you for moving quickly. It turns out I had somewhere better to be. You and Camille should celebrate. I'm sure you both know who her husband is. The read receipt appeared before I put my phone away. At Ashford Pharma's Bay Street headquarters, Sebastian introduced me to the full senior team as general counsel and his wife, in that order. Most people in the room managed a professional expression. The CFO, a woman named Vera Stanton, did not look surprised. She looked calculating, which told me everything I needed to know about which team she'd been playing for. I had spent the previous night studying her file. 15 years at Ashford. Promoted twice during Camille's tenure as a board observer. Her signature was on every payment authorization issued to Apogee Consulting. I walked to her desk 20 minutes after the introductions and asked, quietly and without hostility, for full access to the accounts payable ledger, the R&D contract database, and every payment authorization from the past 3 fiscal years. Vera said she would need to consult with the board. I placed Sebastian's signed executive mandate on her desk. I told her she had 20 minutes to hand over her system credentials before I drafted a referral to the RCMP's Commercial Crime Section, citing obstruction of an internal investigation. Her face went the color of old paper. She opened her desk drawer with hands that weren't entirely steady and handed me her security token and a notebook with her system passwords written in blue ink. I worked until 2 in the morning the first night. The fraud was not subtle. It was the work of people who had been confident, for a long time, that no one would look. Apogee Consulting had billed Ashford's accounts for services that could not be verified against any corporate event calendar, any signed deliverable, any communications record. The invoices described things like strategic pipeline consultation and regulatory preparation support. Generic language designed to survive a cursory review. It would not survive mine. I traced the money through 3 holding layers to a private bank in Liechtenstein, registered beneficiary. C. Ferrante Ashford. Camille's offshore account. The 40% that didn't go offshore went to Vertex Bio. To Grant. To the operating budget of the startup I had helped build on weekends and evenings, while also billing 60-hour weeks at my firm. I sat in the blue glow of the monitors and felt something settle in my chest. Cold and certain and quiet. Not grief, exactly. Something more precise than grief. The recognition of a number you've been avoiding finally coming clear. Sebastian arrived at midnight with takeout containers from a Vietnamese place on Spadina. He set one on my desk and pulled a chair beside me. How bad? He asked. 2.1 million confirmed, but she's been preparing to move much more. I turned the monitor toward him. She sold the Muskoka property last month. Cash sale under market value. She's liquid positioning. My estimate is she's ready to wire somewhere between 4 and 5 million offshore. If she gets that transfer through before we can act, we lose it, and she disappears. Sebastian looked at the numbers for a long time. Then he looked at me. What do you need? I ate a forkful of rice. It was the first thing I'd tasted in what felt like a week. I need her to move on a Friday, I said, when the swift cutoff gives us a deadline to work against. And I need someone inside her circle to tell me when she walks into the bank. Vera had been unemployable since the day I terminated her access. I found her 2 days later in a diner in Liberty Village, sitting over a cup of tea, with the posture of someone who had recently discovered how much of her identity had been tied to a title. She looked 10 years older outside that office. I placed 2 sets of documents on the table. The first was a highlighted summary of the wire transfers she had personally authorized, with her signatures circled. The second was a blank cooperation agreement. The OSC treats fraudulent financial reporting seriously, I said. So does the CRA. Your exposure here, even as someone acting on instruction, is significant. She stared at the table. But if you cooperate fully and honestly, I will speak to the Crown on your behalf. The silence stretched out long enough that I heard the cook scraping something in the kitchen. She mentioned Friday, Vera said finally, her voice very low. She said she needed everything cleared before the weekend. Grant called me 4 times the morning after I sent him the photograph. I let the first 3 ring. On the 4th, I answered. His voice had that tight, almost prissy quality it always got when he was frightened. You can't just, Leah, do you understand what you're doing? You've walked into something you don't understand. I've been reviewing Vertex Bio's corporate filings, I said. The SRNED claims, the government grants, the revenue you reported from Apogee's payments. Shall I tell you what I found? Silence on the line. The consulting revenue you received from a company controlled by Camille's brother is misclassified in your financial statements. That's not a civil accounting issue, Grant. That's a criminal reporting matter. You have 3 days to instruct Camille to initiate repayment through Apogee's accounts. If she doesn't, I'm filing with the OSC and referring the file to the RCMP. He tried to bargain. I hung up. Friday arrived gray and wet, rain running sideways across the tower windows. I sat in the general counsel's suite and watched the clock. Sebastian sat across from me, a cup of black coffee cooling at his elbow. Neither of us spoke much. We had learned, in the past 2 weeks, that silence between us didn't require filling. Vera texted at 2:14 p.m. She's at RBC Main Branch, King Street, VIP suite. She brought her own wire forms. I called Ryan Choi at RBC's compliance division. Ryan had been my client for 3 years when I was at the firm. We'd worked on 2 major pharma financing deals together. I had briefed him earlier in the week, provided Ashford's board resolution authorizing me to flag suspicious transactions involving Camille as a shareholder in active litigation. The transfer just entered the queue, Ryan said. 4.8 million. Destination: Private Bank Liechtenstein. Memo: settlement payment per international investment contract. Flag it: anti-money laundering, unusual international transfer, beneficial ownership discrepancy. Kick it to manual review. If I hold it past 3:30, the SWIFT window closes for the weekend. I know. At 2:58 p.m., the transfer status on Sebastian's banking portal shifted to pending compliance review, manual authorization required. At 3:30 p.m., the SWIFT cutoff passed. $4.8 million remained inside a Canadian bank, frozen, going nowhere until Monday at the earliest. By Monday morning, the OSC complaint and the RCMP referral would already be filed. Sebastian poured wine from a bottle his assistant had left in the cabinet. He handed 1 glass to me without a word. She made 1 mistake, I said. What was that? She assumed no one at this company would be more thorough than she was. By Sunday evening, Grant had nowhere left to turn. The CRA had restricted Vertex Bio's Scotiabank account on the basis of my formal complaint about the misclassified consulting payments. His payroll had bounced twice. His 2 remaining employees were gone. Camille wasn't answering. He called me from his own parking garage at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night. I drove there. He was sitting in his car in the dark, and he looked like a man who had finally stopped running and was now just sitting with where he'd ended up. I handed him the equity transfer agreement through the cracked window. Every share of Vertex Bio, the IP portfolio, including the licensing methodology we had developed together during the marriage, which I could document in Discovery as jointly created, assigned back to me in full. He looked at it for a long time. It's worthless now, he said. The underlying technology isn't worthless, I said. That's my work as much as yours. I'm taking it back. He signed. His signature looked like it cost him something. Walking back to my car, I called Sebastian. It's done. 3 words, clean and final, and I felt something in my chest release like a wire going slack. The RCMP arrived at Camille's Rosedale home at 6 the following morning. She did not open the door cooperatively. The story ran in the Globe and Mail's business section by noon. Ashford's share price dropped, recovered, and by close of trading, was higher than it had been the previous week, on investor confidence in the new governance framework the General Counsel had implemented. I didn't read the coverage. I was already at my desk, working. Weeks later, in a lawyer's office with a conference table between us and our respective counsel at our sides, Grant and I finalized the IP transfer. He was thinner. He had the eyes of someone who had spent a month looking clearly at things he'd previously managed not to see. Before we left, he said, "I used to think you were the least impulsive person I'd ever met. You looked up every restaurant before you went. You read contracts twice." "I still do," I said. "And then you married someone you'd known for one evening." I almost smiled. I had good information. He nodded slowly. It was the most honest exchange we'd had in years. 3 weeks after Camille's arrest, Sebastian came to my condo in the Distillery District. It was a Sunday evening, and I was wearing a paint-stained sweatshirt and holding a glass of Malbec, and was, in summary, not prepared for whatever this was going to be. He was holding an envelope. Inside were the annulment papers I had drafted and sent him the previous week. He tore them in half. "You can't void a legal." "I'm proposing amended contract terms," he said. His voice was very even, which I had learned meant he was choosing his words carefully. I looked at the pieces of paper on my floor. "I don't need a wife in the formal sense," he said. "I need someone I trust with the future of a company that employs 4,000 Canadians. Someone who won't look away when a situation is complicated and ugly and requires a clear head. Someone who will argue with me at dinner and be right about half the time and let me be in the room for the other half." He paused. "I have not met another person in my adult life who fits that description. I'm not interested in letting that walk out of the room over a technicality." "That's a partnership pitch," I said, "not a proposal." "It's both." I looked at the torn papers. I thought about the night at that Yorkville restaurant, the cold pavement, the way I'd stood there for 4 minutes, trying to process something I should have seen coming for longer than I had. I thought about the morning I signed the separation agreement on our kitchen counter, telling myself I understood it, that I was fine, that I was being practical. All the professional distance I'd wrapped around, the fact that I was choosing to trust someone over my own instincts. I thought about Sebastian, appearing, without announcement at midnight, with food, and the particular restraint he had shown when parked outside his house in the dark at 3 a.m. on the drive. Back from a conversation I'd had to have with an elderly couple who deserved better than any of this. I had finally cried and he had said nothing at all. Just put his hand on my shoulder and let me be. "New terms," I said. "Equal weight on every major decision at Ashford that touches my division. You stop scheduling over my calendar without asking. And you learn to make coffee that doesn't taste like it was filtered through regret." He almost smiled. It was, I had noticed, one of the rarer things about him, and therefore one of the more valuable. "Agreed," he said. I let him in. There is a terrace at the house Sebastian keeps in Prince Edward County, and in late September, when the light comes down over the lake in that particular way that makes Ontario look like it's showing off, I sit there sometimes and let myself feel the whole weight of the past year without flinching from it. Not the worst of it, not the best of it. All of it together as it actually was. Camille's trial begins in January. Luca Ferrante accepted a plea deal and repaid his portion of the misappropriated funds. Grant received a conditional sentence for his role in the scheme. Cooperation with the Crown, full restitution, a permanent director's bar from any publicly traded company. He is, by the last account I heard, working in Guelph. I hope he is all right. I mean that in the particular way, you mean something when it no longer has the power to hurt you. The IP portfolio I recovered from Vertex Bio has been licensed to a research hospital in Hamilton. The methodology Grant and I developed together is being used to accelerate early-stage oncology trials. I find that satisfying in a way I did not anticipate. Sebastian is inside on the phone, working through something with a team in Vancouver. He catches my eye through the glass doors and holds up one finger. 1 minute. It will be more than a minute. I know this about him now. I don't mind. The lake is very still. I breathe in. The past is not gone. I have learned it never quite is, but it no longer determines what happens next. That is my job now.